Sorry about that. Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to our regular meeting scheduled for August 9, 2021. At this time, I'd like to call our meeting to order. And with that said, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time, we will move on to the approval of the agenda. You were all presented with the agenda earlier or late last week. You've had time to look it over. And at this time, I will accept any motions to approve that agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Swanberg. Mr. Lozey, seconded. Thank you. Any discussion, comments, concerns about the agenda? Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Moving on to presentations. This time we're going to have a presentation regarding MetroNet. At this time we'll introduce, I'm sorry, name please?
John Jensen.
John Jensen, welcome to our council meeting. I appreciate you coming here and sharing your time with us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and thanks for having me. Actually, I think I presented one other time a few years ago to the Sueur City Council. So I am John Jensen with MetroNet. I'm a VP of Economic Development. I was the past CEO of MetroNet, so that's why I've been around for a while. So I'm going to start with who is MetroNet. It's a 100% fiber optic internet, television, and phone company. Started in Indiana in 2004, serves over 110 communities today in 11 states. Texas was just their 11th state. Blazing fast symmetrical internet, and it is no copper in the infrastructure anywhere. It's fiber right to the residents from all the states that they're connected to. So a lot of people say they've got fiber infrastructure, but not many have 100% fiber. Passion for customer service, and I think we just went over 270,000 customers. Fiber benefit, quality of life, future proof with unlimited capacity. You can just change the infrastructure is fine. The glass, you can put different equipment on each end, so you don't have to do it can handle any speeds really. I mean, we've got deploying 100 gig connections today. Latest technology. I didn't even realize it, but 4K TV, and a lot of people probably have them. They don't even work unless you have fiber to them. I had a 4K TV before I got fiber in my house, and I thought I got a new TV that night when they hooked it up. It was crazy. Fiber benefits, increase home value. It's kind of different. There's only 20% of the homes in the United States that have access to fiber. I think that's going to change dramatically in the next 5 years. Competition, obviously, you have, I think it's MediaCom here. Competition will make everybody better. And in the MetroNet markets, we have the fastest internet. MetroNet community will benefit from a high level of customer service, broad availability to the city households, local presence. While we might not have a office in Sueur, we'll have one in Northfield and Owatonna and close by. Local presence will be here for community events and community involvement, and superior fiber services. All of our speeds are symmetrical, meaning you get the same upload and download speed. So you don't have to worry about that. More for the same pricing, no long-term contracts. They'll come and spend the money overlaying here, and if you sign up and a month later you didn't get what you wanted, you can change back. So they really put their money where their mouth is, saying that they're going to give you superior service. Neighborhood communication. This is what I think MetroNet probably does the best, and what is usually, I mean, reality is we're going to make a mess of your town for a little while, right? We're going to go up and down every street. We're going to go hopefully to a lot of houses. We won't go to a house until they've signed up. but then you got to put a drop right to their house. And it does make a mess. We will, if it's aerial, if you have poles in your backyard or front yard, we'll do it aerial, just same way that the utility comes to you today. If it's underground, we'll be underground. We'll follow those paths. You were telling me that you're going to put some underground next year. If we get this done, we'll do it aerial. And then when the power company, which is local too, goes underground, we'll get in that joint trench and at that time and go underground. First thing we do is this construction communication. You can't really see them well, but that big letter on the left, every household will get that letter. And half of them will throw it in the garbage, but that'll be our first time of saying, hey, we're coming here, want you to know what's going on. Then the next one will be that one in the top right there, the green. It'll be my neon green or neon orange, something that they'll for sure see in their mailbox. And they still probably, half of them will throw it away. So now you got the 70% of them or something, right? And then last but not least, and this is when they'll figure it out, is that little flag there next to the driveway in the bottom corner. We'll put one of those by every driveway and take pictures of them so that we can say that we put them by every driveway. And still we'll have people that call when we're coming down the street saying, I didn't ever hear anything about this. What are you doing coming down the street, right? But we're gonna put that effort out, and then at the beginning of the neighborhood or something, we'll put a sign up, construction beginning, stuff like that, just so everybody knows. And on all of this stuff, it says, if you have a dog fence, call us and tell us. We'll bring you out flags to mark your dog fence. If you have a sprinkler system, tell us. We'll bring out flags and mark your sprinkler system. We don't know what's underground if you don't tell us when it comes to those personal things. But we'll still hit some dog fences and still hit some water lines, probably sprinkler systems. We'll repair them and get on down the road. But we're just trying to save them and us problem. The other thing that we'll have, there will be a guy in town that you'll have his number, the city will have his number. And if you have somebody that needs to talk to a person, they have some issue or something, they'll do that. All of this other communication, and what we'd ask the city to do is have them either call the 800 number on here or go to our website. And if you go to the website or you make a call, we're saying we'll be back to them within 24 hours. And that's if they call Friday night at 5 o'clock, we'll be back to them by Monday. It's not a Saturday, Sunday thing, but we want to get back to them. And if they call the city and the city forgets to call us and we don't know they're out there with an issue, so we really want them to follow the directions on here and contact Metronet. They'll open up what they call a ticket. And on a monthly basis, we will come back and report to you, here's the tickets we had, here's the questions they asked or the result of it. We want to be back to them in 24 hours. And once we know that they have an issue, we want that fixed within 48 hours. Those are our goals, and we're about 97 to 99% accurate at doing that. And those questions there's a lot of them, right? When can I get hooked up? What's the pricing? That kind of stuff, right? They're not all complaints, but that's where we want them to go, because still in this process, the guy knocking on the door still sells 30% of our subscriptions to the services, because people want to learn about streaming. They want to know how to operate the equipment, that kind of stuff. So you can sign up online, but we just still do a lot of consultative sales in this business. Restoration process. If we're going down your street and we go by your place on Monday morning, the expectation is by Wednesday night, you won't know we were in your yard. Now, you can have things that happen. What if we break a sidewalk, a piece of concrete, something like that, right? But normally we want to be through your yard in 48 hours. Take it up and be out of there. Put it back together. we do a phenomenal job of restoration, and you have to, because remember, these are our customers, and if we do a terrible job in their yard and don't make them happy, they're not going to sign up. So we really pride ourselves on that. Once again, construction website, same thing. And responsiveness, 95% of the time within 24 hours. That's if we know about it, and that's why we keep telling them, you gotta tell us and them the website or the phone number. And once again, if the city does get something, you probably know the 4 or 5 people that are going to want to talk to somebody. We want to know so we can get out there and make them happy. Permitting strategy, and I've talked to Jasper about this. The design will be done for Sueur here in the next couple weeks, but basically our permitting strategy is to give the full thing to the city and have them approve it. We can't do it all at once, and Sueur will probably be broken into maybe what we call 4 LCPs. So we'd like the first LCP so you guys can get used to the drawings, what you're approving, and we'll give that to you ahead of time. And then with everybody's good with how it looks and how we're doing it, what we don't want to have is we get a first LCP and then the second or third one gets hung up in design or, getting approved, because then you're moving equipment out and moving it back in. It's just costly, right? So we're looking to make sure that we can get the permits lined up and finish the job. Transparent communication. If the city's got an issue, we want to know about it. If a customer in the city's got an issue, we want to know about it. And then we want to get it resolved, right? Permits, I think I just talked about that. And then pre-construction meetings prior to the first drill going in the ground or the first fiber getting hung on the pole. We'll want to meet with Public Works, anybody that's going to be doing the inspecting, our crews, and so everybody understands the rules of engagement, safety, and all that stuff. We'll have those every week. We'll give the city on a daily or weekly basis where we're going to be. We use a lot of contractors. Every contractor will have a Metronet contractor shirt on, yellow vest. Every contractor will have a picture and that they're a Metronet contractor, and every vehicle that's with us will have a Metronet contractor sign on the vehicles. So you're going to know who's working for Metronet and who isn't. And if they're here and they don't have that, they won't be here. It's very important to us to be identified and for them to be identified to the community. Go to market, as I said, we have consultative sales. You can order on the website, and we will have door-to-door reps selling, and whatever your solicitation hours are, and that will follow those. And once again, everybody will know their Metronet. They'll have badges and photos and everything as well. And that's it. Like I said, it still is about 30% of all our sales is right knocking on the door and explaining it to them. This is our standard pricing. The internet has a $10 technology fee, and the fiber TV has a $15 transmission fee. The fiber TV that's really the cost that we pay for the 200 channels or whatever, or the basic is just ABC, NBC, and CBS, because you can't make any money in the video with all the big guys that own the video, all of our competitors, Comcast and Charter and everyone. So they just mark it as what our costs are, and it's $15 for the transmission over our network to get it to you. That's really all I got. Any questions, concerns, thoughts?
Mr. Jensen, I just want to thank you for coming, and it's important that our community has some opportunities to use the technology as it's changing so fast. It's good to have a lot of options. So with it's good to hear this. This is good news. Any of you council members have any other questions or comments?
Well, in the last year, we've all found out how important the internet is.
Yeah, especially when we're all at home. Yes.
Yeah, no question.
It is. What any communities around here you guys are servicing right now?
Northfield, we're just starting. We did Owatonna, Jaguar did, Metronet did Rochester, city of Rochester. Eagle Lake, we're constructing right now. But we've got proposals out to La Center, Cleveland, La Sueur, Waterville, Elysian, Morristown. And mainly because we have the infrastructure already in all these communities. And Metronet probably is more a big city. They're a tier 2 city company. But when they bought Jaguar, and kind of the mission of Jaguar was for rural America, right? And that's where our network is. And so I've been able to get them to say, it's no different to go do La Sueur than it is to go do Rochester. You can just get it done faster, get the same percentages, probably maybe even a little more. Percentages in rural America, certainly if you get out and going down the roads, gravel roads or 99 or something, you can get 8 out of 10 customers because they don't have a choice. So yeah, we're trying to Victoria, Chanhassen, just finished Cologne, Watertown, Waconia, Shorewood, Carver. So they're all on, we haven't finalized all of those, but we're in discussions with all of those.
Very good. Thank you.
I have a question real quickly, without getting into too much detail. Current customers of different services have to have a router modem. Will yours be compatible with most of those, or will that be a purchase cost or a rental cost?
It's a rental cost, and I think it's $5 or $10. You can use yours, but we really prefer that you don't, because with this network, we can look in and see our router and see if it's the problem. We can from support say it's not the router, it's either before the router or after the router. If we're using yours, it's probably gonna be a day or two before we get out there and can figure out what the real problem is.
And will the customer have the option of purchasing such a router, or only?
I don't
rental?
believe so.
Okay,
I don't
thank you.
believe so.
Just
Yep.
asking.
Yep.
Is there a time frame for making a decision or getting maps? for next
Well,
steps?
in my discussions with Jasper, I think that you'll have to open it up for public, right? An RFP. And I think you're going to try to do that next session. And then you got to wait till your following meeting, and then you can approve that Metronet can go. I've talked to Jasper because a lot of that's formalities. I'd like to start with the Public Works guys in a couple weeks or something, send some pole attachment agreements. I don't know if, I think La Sueur is probably about 50-50 aerial and underground. If we can get the area or underground done before it freezes, we can do the aerial in the winter. I don't know how many of them will work in the winter, but just to try to keep them working and keep going. It's probably spring before everything's done, to be very honest with you, but the sooner we can get through that process, the better.
Yeah, I'll add Metronet attorney, our attorney has been working on the franchise agreement, which we have a franchise agreement with Mediacom right now, recently updated. So their franchise agreement will look just like ours, but there is a public hearing notice, public comment period, and then we have to wait 30 days after that before we can actually adopt the Metronet franchise agreement. So we're hoping to get that process started at the next meeting, so the August 23rd meeting. So and then the public hearing and all the other things that we have to follow per state statute. So we're hoping to get it rolling. We've been talking for a while, and the attorneys go back and forth quite a bit, and we work those things out. So we're pretty much there.
All right, thank you. Mr.
Thank
Jensen,
you.
any last comments?
Nope.
Thank
Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I appreciate you coming. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
All right.
Looking forward to seeing you. Moving on to item 5, consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the city council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. These items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the agenda and considered in normal sequence. And with that, I will move to Mr. Krugel and have you kind of review these consent agenda items with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kirby, members of City Council. We have the minutes from the last meeting, July 26th. We have disbursement approvals through today, August 9th. Pretty substantial amount of disbursements. We do have some bond payments in there, payments that are on the consent agenda or on the regular agenda for tonight as well. And then we have our purchase power from MMPA, which is a significant amount, as you can imagine. It's been a pretty hot summer, so we've been selling a lot of electricity. We have the third pay application from Landmark Structures, which is for the water tower project. Messer membership assessment that might be new to some council members because they didn't request an assessment last year due to COVID-19. But they are requesting it this year. Messer is a group that we work closely with when we had MRPUC and we had a contested case petition with MPCA, and they are a voice for greater Minnesota cities regarding environmental type things. So I think it's supported at the staff level, and I believe the members of council that were part of that discussion with the contested case, thought it was a good, they represented us well. And then last is the downtown Rotary clock. I thought it would be good to provide an update of what that clock is going to look like. That clock will be on the intersection of Ferry and Main Street on that northeast corner. So just to kind of give City Council an update on that. The Main Street project item for disbursement, I'm using that as an opportunity to kind of give an update about the Main Street project, and we can talk a little bit more about that then. So that's all I have.
Wonderful. Anybody have any questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain any motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Mr. Lozey, first motion.
Second.
Ms. Mahoney, second motion. Any discussion, comments, concerns? Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Moving on. Public comment. Public comment provides an opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Persons wishing to make a comment must sign up in advance of the meeting on the sheet provided and identify themselves, providing their name and address. At this time, do we have anybody that would like to make a public comment?
We have nobody signed up tonight.
Looks empty. Thank you. With that, we will then move on to the regular agenda. Moving on to agenda item 7A, the 2020 financial audit presentation. We have Mr. Matt Mayer here. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Appreciate the invitation to present tonight. You've got two documents in front of you, which are the final product of our audit, but I've got a PowerPoint presentation that's going to cover the main points, so feel free just to kick back and follow along with that. Unless you've got some specific questions in the documents, be happy to address those as well. The city each year has a responsibility to prepare financial statements for the public, and our job as your auditor is to come in at the end of the year to test, examine, and give an opinion on those financial statements so that users of them can be assured that they are accurate and a true picture of the city's financial position and results of operations. We do that through an independent auditor's report. You'll see that on our firm's letterhead in the front of the financial statements. It's an unmodified opinion, or the best that we can give you. And what it means is that the numbers we're going to be looking at and the analysis I'm providing are numbers that you can trust and that you as a council can use for your governance responsibility and to make financial decisions going forward on behalf of the city. That didn't happen just by itself. I certainly want to recognize the effort of city staff under the leadership of Jasper, city administrator, as well as the finance director, Joe Roby, who did an excellent job in working with us. Joe's new to the job, and he and our team work very well together, and I think we've got an excellent product for you tonight to talk about and get your input on when we get to the financial analysis part of it. We do have to play the bad guy as part of an auditor sometimes and look at your systems, your processes, and give you some findings for recommendations for improvement. And some of those have to do with internal control. And internal control is the way you do business. It's the way you process transactions. It's the way you safeguard your assets. It's the way you make sure you get good numbers at the end of the year. And we've got two recommendations for you there. One is to work with your utility billing process. You put some new software in place, and that's making good improvements on recommendations that we've had in the past. We are looking for a little bit better reporting coming from that software so we can get the backup for the numbers and make sure that you are truly getting the revenue and the numbers that you have coming to you there. And we're confident that after some discussions with your software team in 2021 here, that you'll check that one off the list going forward. Another finding that you've seen before is lack of segregation of accounting duties. And in an accounting environment, we like to have a lot of checks and balances. We want somebody to actually do the transaction. We want a couple people looking over their shoulder to make sure they're doing everything right. And in a small office environment, we just run out of people eventually. And it's probably not something that you're going to fix ultimately, but we're going to remind you of it each year, and we'll work with Jasper and Joe to figure out how best to use your staff so that they continue to be efficient, but also provide some of those safeguards. So again, we're safeguarding those public dollars as well as getting some good numbers for you at the end of the year. The state auditor also wants us to make sure that you're complying with all the statutes that are out there related to municipalities. This has to do with contracting and bidding, how you deposit and invest your funds, things like that. And we had a couple findings there. A couple payments to vendors got paid late. You've got 45 days to do that, and a couple fell outside of that range. And right now, a lot of the old paper check way of paying and doing business is kind of going away. A lot of things are happening electronically, and that's certainly fine. It's what's going to be happening and how accounting is going to work, how you're going to pay. If you think about all the bills you pay at home, a lot of those are probably electronically withdrawn right out of your checking. You're not written checks out each month to pay your bills, and that's fine. But we want to have some safeguards in place to make sure there is that paper trail that there would have been with the check. So administration is going to come back to you with some policies, procedures, and getting those in place. So we've got some sort of a trail for all those electronic activities going forward. So again, our thanks to this, the city's administration, very cooperative. They have the same shared goal that we have, and that's accurate numbers. And again, so you as a council can use those numbers. They're not just numbers on a piece of paper. They're the tools that you use to run the city. And that's what I want to segue into the second part of my presentation here. We're going to talk about 6 or 8 of the city's funds. And the accounting for cities is such that we split the city into different funds. We've got the general fund, we got a water fund, we got a sewer fund, we got an electric fund. And the hope is that each of those funds are going to be self-supporting and that we can evaluate them on their own merits. And you can decide whether the general fund's doing well or the water fund's doing well, or we need some help in some of those funds. And what you're going to find as I talk about it with you here, over time, some of these funds have kind of gotten intertwined and reliant on each other. And I want to try and pull that back a little bit for you, make sure you're understanding what's going on with these funds and making sure that as you make your decisions regarding the budget, as you make your decisions regarding the levy, you have the full story backing that up. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about that. When we talk about the general fund, the best way to look at that is the budget. If you run a business, the first number you're going to look at is the bottom line, the profit or the loss. It really doesn't make a lot of sense in the government environment. In the government environment, you as a council say this is the way we want things done. We're going to have this much revenue coming in from the levy. This is what you can spend. And at the end of the year, it's on administration to make sure that happens. So what I want to talk about tonight in the general fund is how you did in relation to that budget. So just a reminder on what the budget was for 2020. You had about 2.2 million in revenue budgeted, 2.7 million in expenditures, and about $500,000 in transfers in, mostly from your electric fund, from the franchise fees to cover the difference. And you had a balanced budget. So if everything went perfectly according to the budget that you approved about 18 months ago in December of 2019, we wouldn't have changed our financial position at all in the general fund. And that's kind of the benchmark that I'm looking at as we go to the next slide here. Okay. Now, during the year, revenue came in a lot better than anticipated. It came in about $817,000 more than you thought. You had a budget of 2.1, it came in at 3 million. So what caused that? CARES funding was a huge part of that. You got about $300,000 laid on you from the federal government. You had to use it for specific purposes, but $300,000 came into the general fund during the year. From that was unexpected when you did the budget in 2019. Another thing was the deed grant, and you didn't have a lot to do with that, but you're the fiscal host for it. The grant is in your name. You pass that off to the HRA. but that does need to get picked up as revenue on your side. So when you look at the revenue, it looks like you're way over, but we know why that is, and that's the main reason why we're talking about it tonight. Expenditures for the year came in over budget as well, but the main reason for that is that you pass that money along to the HRA. It came in, it came out, and otherwise you're pretty much on budget. As far as the department heads doing a nice job, they paid attention to the budget that you gave them, public safety, public works, streets and parks. They all came in right around their budget amount. Public safety just a little bit over for the year, certainly understandable in the COVID environment. So your fund balance, rather than staying flat or even, like your budget said, actually went up $140,000. So a good thing, a positive thing. Your financial health, your financial position in the fund moved up. So you are now sitting at a little over $1 million, almost $1.1 million in fund balance. So what does that mean? That's really your financial health. We take your assets, subtract your liabilities. That's what you've got to use for next year's budget, basically. And as a council, you have put a policy together that says that you want that number to be 40% of a year's worth of spending. And there's a lot of ways to look at that. If I take that 1.1 million and divide it into the 3.2 up there, it only comes out to about 33%. So it seems like you're probably under your fund balance policy. But keep in mind that 3.2 million would have been a lot less if it wasn't for that deed money that you had to send out. So really, if we look at it in relation to your 2021 budget, which is back in that $2 million range or so, you're at about a 40% fund balance, 41% fund balance. So on the positive side, I think financial health wise, fund balance wise, the number that you're targeting is right where you want it to be. But I'm going to go and share a couple other things with you on this. As I talked about, that fund balance is made up of a couple of things: assets minus liabilities. Assets are what you own, liabilities are what you owe. And the biggest asset that you would think you'd have in the general fund would be cash. And you would hope that that $1.1 million would be $1.1 million in cash. You could just write bills out and you'd have it there. Actually, your biggest asset in the general fund right now is an IOU from the community center fund. The general fund over time has sent almost $600,000 over to the community center fund, asking for it to be paid back. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, the community center fund is having some challenges operationally and doesn't have the capacity to do that. So I can give you good news and say you're at 40% because that's what the number comes out to be. But I want you to know that that 40%, half of it, more than half of it, is actually an IOU to yourself from the community center. And only when the community center gets healthy enough to pay you back is that actually going to be part of that real 40% fund balance. Does that make sense? And again, we'd like those funds to be separate on their own, but when the community center needs help, only place to go for it is the general fund. And now we got to kind of figure out where we're going to go with that. We'll talk about the community center in a little bit. The other point I want to make with you is that the general fund right now is heavily reliant on the electric fund. And that's okay. You've chosen policy-wise to use franchise fees to cover a lot of the operations in that fund. You're transferring about $500,000 a year right now out of the electric fund over to the general fund to cover those operations, okay? The franchise fees that you're actually collecting in the electric fund, though, are only about $350,000. And I had a good conversation with Jasper to begin the meeting. I understand you're kind of reconfiguring the electric rates and the franchise fee is really not going to be a factor anymore. But I just want you to know that if you're relying on the electric fund, it's about 20% of your general fund budget right now. It's almost as much as the levy that you have in the general fund. Just understand, again, if those funds are on their own, that's perfectly fine. But if you're relying on the electric fund, not only do we have to look at the health of the general fund, but we have to keep an eye on what's going on in the electric fund too, to make sure it can keep sending that $500,000 every year over. So I'm going to show you the electric fund in a little bit as well. All right, let's go on to the next slide from here. Actually, I'm going to skip over a couple. Well, let's look at this one quickly here. This is revenue, expenditures, transfers, fund balance over the course of the last few years. The general fund was at its healthiest about 5 years ago in 2016, where you're seeing about a 46% fund balance ratio. Again, that 33% for 2020, that's a little bit low. It's because we're calculating it on 3.2 million of expenditures. And if not for the deed grant and some of that CARES activity, it probably would be closer to 40 or 41%. So again, just so you put that in context. Let's skip over the pie charts here, Jasper, and let's get to the community center fund and talk a little bit about that one. Here we go. Let's do the same exercise on the community center. Community center fund is a budget-based fund as well. That fund had budgeted revenue of 1.4, expenditures of 1.2, and transfers out to cover debt service on the bonds for that fund for the facility of about $187,000. So again, our expectation is that the community center fund wouldn't change its financial health if the budget was followed for the year. So let's go to the next slide and see what actually happened here. Not surprisingly, actual revenue for the year in the community center fund fell short. It was about $530,000, most of that in charges for fees for services. And again, if you're shut down most of the year as far as program wise because of COVID, we understand that. So not critiquing it in any way, just saying that that's what ultimately happened in this fund for the year. Expenditures for the year were also under budget, which is a good thing. Management did a nice job of understanding the revenue stream was not going to be there, modified the spending in that fund, and kept expenditures under budget as well by about $320,000. So fund balance actually went down, but not as significantly as had in years past. It went down about $19,000. But as I talked about earlier, fund balance is what you own less what you owe. The community center owes more than it actually owns, and that thing that it owes is about $600,000 back to the general fund for all the loans that it's gotten from the general fund over the years. So it doesn't really have a fund balance. It has a deficit of about $600,000, and that deficit has been sitting there for a number of years. So the annual deficit from operations was $23,000. You did transfer in some dollars this year, about $180,000 from the general fund to help things out. And after everything was said and done, you pretty much came out even for the year. So didn't lose any ground, but didn't make up any ground either. And that again is something I want to make sure that everyone's in the loop on and understands that, because it is placing a little bit of a burden on the general fund when it comes to operations, because the general fund balance, again, half of it is tied up in this loan. So let's look at that chart on the next page here. Here's the community center activity. There was a little bit of a trend developing. It was starting to grow in activity from 2016 to 2018. That really tapered off in 2019 from operations, from revenue. In 2020 is really going to be an anomaly. So to try and judge whether operations really are continuing to decline or whether they are actually going to pick up again after COVID, we're just have to wait a year to figure out where that is. But take a look at that fund balance number. That line is a little bit deceiving because the numbers for it are on the right side of the chart. You might just want to look at the bottom line on the chart underneath. That fund balance has gone from a deficit of about $200,000 and down to a deficit of about $625,000 at the end of the year. And if you remember one thing from my presentation tonight, this is what I'd like you to remember. I understand there's a task force in place to kind of talk about this, figure out a plan for it. I think that task force is great. It's going to work on operations, but policy-wise, finance-wise, it's going to come back to the council to make decisions financially on levy, on subsidies, on transfers, on loan forgiveness, whatever your decisions are, to hopefully get that fund back in place. And I've worked with cities in the past that have had golf courses that just haven't performed the way they have, or ice arenas. And what I might recommend, if I can tonight, is just to put a 6-year plan, a 10-year plan in place, and just think about a transfer from the general fund or one of your utility funds to help out, and just erase that consciously and methodically over time, just so you are making progress on that. A balanced budget is great, but if you have a balanced budget in your community center fund in future years, you're going to be right at that negative $600,000 every year if you meet the budget. So you got to figure out a way to have a surplus to get you back financially healthy in that fund going forward. Okay. Let's go on from here. I got a fund with some good news. Let's skip over this one and we'll get right to the water fund. Water fund is doing very well. You incurred some debt this year for some water improvements, so it's going to have some debt service obligations going forward that are fairly significant. The debt service in this fund right now is not too bad, but with the new bonds, it'll be a little bit more significant. So what happens in this fund is that you have very solid operating income. A lot of the expenses in this fund are actually paper expenses, depreciation, so it's not cash out the door. So this fund cash flows very well, and it actually has an unrestricted net position or fund balance at the end of the year of about $2.3 million. And you're spending only about $1.5 million, and of that, only about 1.2 is in cash. So that's a very good place to be, a very liquid place to be in that fund. But one thing to remember, unlike the general fund, where that fund balance is just for operations, if you have capital needs or major repairs, a lot of times you're going to want to dip into the net position or the fund balance. So this fund's going to need some operational money, and it's going to need some excess there for capital improvements as well. So this fund's doing well. Keep an eye on it. As a council, decide what's a reasonable fund balance to have for operations and what's a reasonable fund balance to have for capital going forward. Sewer fund is next. And unfortunately, this fund has had some challenges as well with some of the changes with MRPUC and a lot of the consolidation of the sewer activity and the way we've handled service to customers. It's a lot of ups and downs over the course of the last few years here. But again, this fund has a significant deficit. It has a deficit of about $1.9 million. It's relying on the water fund, which is healthy, to cover it. So just like the community center right now is reliant on the general fund, your sewer fund is reliant on the water fund. So again, with that water fund, let me just give you, actually the water fund cash is a little bit off because it's got those bond proceeds in there, but a lot of that fund balance of 1.9 in the water is eaten up by that same deficit here in the sewer fund. So again, I know you've monitored rates. I know you're looking at rates and figuring out how to approach that. You can see the revenue is up both in the water and the sewer this year, so we're moving in the right direction. But this fund does have significant debt service, so while it is operating at a pretty significant income, even if it had $1 million in income each year, which it does, you're writing a check for bonds for $1 million out of this fund each year as well. So that income is there, but then it goes out the door in cash to the bondholders right away. So some challenges in this fund as well. And again, that would be second place, I think. Community center first, sewer utility would be the next project I think I would have you take on as you move forward. Electric fund would be the next one. And this fund, after a couple of years of down activity, actually had a solid up year. Fund balance in this fund is $800,000 to end the year. So it is a positive place. You do have about $8.4 million of activity in this fund. It is pretty clear the revenue comes in, the expenses are very regimented, so I think that's a reasonable fund balance to have. But again, just a reminder that you are relying on this fund for $500,000 a year to go into your general fund. So not a lot of cushion with an $800,000 fund balance. $500,000 or so to the general fund each year is sustainable for now. But again, you can see that that has gone down from 1.3 million back in 2016 to about 800,000 here in 2020. So again, what we'd like to do, keep each fund on its own merits, try not to intermingle them if we can. But what happens over time sometimes is there is that reliance, and that's fine, that's policy decisions, but I just want to understand what ultimately happens regarding your financial position regarding those decisions. To wrap things up, I think that'll do it. That was the last chart I had. So again, our thanks to Joe, our thanks to Jasper, our thanks to you as a council for the chance to talk to you tonight about it. I think the city is making some good decisions regarding the financial position. Certainly budget compliance is excellent. So once you as a council approve a budget, handing it off to your team, they're making it happen. The question and the recommendation that I've got for you tonight is to, when you put those budgets together, think about some of those things that I talked about tonight regarding financial health, financial goals, and work toward a goal of financial health and independent sustainability for each of those funds moving forward. We're here to work with you on that, talk with Joe and Jasper out that as well, so they know our views on it as well, and we'd be happy to be available for workshops, work sessions, whatever you'd like to move you in the right direction further. So I'll leave it at that. Stay for any questions you got.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a very enlightening report, and thank you again for kind of reiterating what some of our strengths and weaknesses are, or some of our challenges. And with that, I would like to ask any council members if they have any questions.
Yeah, could you go back to the community center slide? And what, if any, answers did we have for the big jump from 2018 to 2019? I mean, that's pretty significant in the debt.
Going from 270 to 606.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a look here. Well, what's happening, I think, if you take a look at revenues and expenditures, look at the green portion of the bar and the blue portion of the bar in 2016, 2017, 2018. So you're actually running at a quote unquote profit. We usually don't use that word in the government sector, but your inflows, revenue was higher than your outflows. What happened in 2019 was that a lot of your revenue stream went down. And I'm not sure if that was charges for services or did we do anything with the levy that year or not. But you can see that the revenue went down significantly that year, but expenditures in the fund for that year, inflationary operations wise, they just kept chugging along. So rather than kind of making some progress or holding steady with that deficit, you really took that hit in that year, and it's the big one, probably about $300,000 or $400,000 that year. So
My question is that the year we changed the structuring of our membership also?
It was definitely. And I think what ended up happening with that is we had a bunch of members that had automatic withdraws, and this gave them an opportunity to not be members, is what we found. So we reached out to every member that was existing and let them know that the rates were changing. And then in that time, people that maybe didn't have active memberships or were paying for memberships but weren't active made the decision to not be members.
And was it also about that time when the insurance carriers stopped subsidizing your membership as well?
That would be also correct, yeah.
And any reason that you can think of why the expenses would have gone up?
It's similar trending. I would say it's following kind of the trend line from 16 to 19, kind of that increase in inflationary costs for services, things like that. But that was the last year that we had the pool open, I would say, the indoor pool, and there were some pretty year round. Yeah. And there's some significant expenditures for some maintenance stuff in there for that year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanberg. Any other questions for Mr. Mayor? Comments, concerns?
I guess just one more quick one. I mean, why, help me understand why it's important that each category should be revenue neutral or obviously to the plus side.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to that general fund slide again, if we can, Jasper. That one right there, perfect. So when there's two parts to the budget, two parts of the evaluation of the general fund. I talked about the budget being one of them. You guys put together a budget, hand it off to administration. It's their job to make that happen. That budget should have an end goal to it, and that end goal is the financial health of the fund as measured by your fund balance policy. Okay, so you think, and based on your policy, you think having 40% of your budget in reserve is a good place to be. And I agree with that. That's a reasonable range. Anywhere from 35 to 50, I'm perfectly good with. About a half a year's worth of spending makes sense to me. You're not a bank. You're not here to pile up money. And you want to have enough to cash flow. And your major revenue stream comes in May or June. So you need about 40% to get you through the first part of the year till that property tax levy hits and the LGA money from the state comes in. So 40% is a perfect number to use. 40% though, as I talked about, to you, it would think that would mean 40% would be having that money in the bank and having that cash in the bank. So that would mean that you would have enough cash to get through the first 4 months of the year and write checks for the first 4 months of the year to cover that. What I'm telling you is that you would have about 2 months worth, because of that 1.1 million, 600,000 of that cash has been sent over to the community center fund to cover the deficit over there. So you only got about 500,000. So having each fund stand on its own merits, be revenue neutral, have its own fund balance is important, because when you're trying to evaluate what's really going on, I could have just come here tonight and said, you got a 40% fund balance in the general fund, you're good policy. And I'm gonna go home and leave it at that. But I think I need, okay. But I think you need to know that whole story is that 40%, yeah, it's there, but half of that 40% is an IOU to yourself. And so because we got funded the different funds, that's what happens. So it's not wrong, it's not bad to have that, but I want you to understand that. And the community center fund either needs to get back into positive territory, so it doesn't need to be subsidized, or you need to forgive that loan that you've got if you don't think it ever can repay. And right now, I'll say if you forgave that loan, your fund balance would go down because we're going to write off that asset. It's not going to be repaid. So then you'd be down to a 15 or 20% fund balance. And that's the story. So,
And if I could add one thing about planning for the community center, we've kind of taken some of these things into account for the 2021 budget. We have a 10-year plan, to generate some excess revenue above expenditures. So that's where we're at with that. So we've started doing that process. We're at the end of 2021. We're hoping that we'll have a $60,000 surplus and then keep building off of that.
Very good.
and that's all our recommendations, is have a conscious plan to work on it. And I think if you have that plan, what I don't want to have is a balanced budget, say we're good. And I want to understand that it's okay to have that surplus because you got some work to do to get back to where you want to be in that. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And any other questions? If not, City Council at this time will accept any motions to approve the 2020 financial audit performed by Bergen KDV.
Mr. Mayor, so move.
Thank you, Councilmember Krogman, seconded by Mr. Lozey. All those in, before I do, any questions, comments, or concerns before we take a vote? Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving on to item 7B, Reconnecting Main Street project update and pay request approval. Mr. Krugel.
Thank you, Mayor Kirby, members of City Council. Normally, I'd have this agenda item on a consent agenda, as it's just kind of a routine pay application approval, but thought I'd take time to just kind of give an update on what's going on with the work there, as there are some changes to the original timeline, and I'll kind of go into some details on that. So the request that we'll have to evaluate at the end of this is the request to approve that pay application number 3 from Pembroke Companies, totaling $213,617.36. But what I'd like to do is just kind of provide a project update to everybody so that you kind of know what's going on. So you've probably seen a lot of activity. It's a very visible project. I'm sure you've been getting a lot of questions, comments, things of that nature. I've fielded some questions from council members, a lot from the public as well, but all of the utility work has been completed. So what that means is that the water, the sewer, and the storm sewer has all been completed. That's all in the ground, all connected. And they're starting to work on some of those other items. You could see that some of the wall footings have been poured. The walls themselves will continue to be poured this week. I think they're going to come back and they're going to be in town tomorrow to do that. Curb and sidewalk, you'll start seeing that starting as well, maybe toward the end of this week into next week, and that would be completed. If you remember, this whole project is concrete. That'll be completed by the end of September. If you remember to the original contract, it said substantial completion in 90 days. They are running into some supply chain problems with some of the fixtures and things like that, light poles. A lot of things are just in back order. I know that we had some light poles that were hung up in customs coming from Canada for almost a month. So there's just things that are just a lot slower because of just what's going on in the world nowadays right now. So there are supply chain issues that we're working with that are affecting that final completion date. And we're working with the contractor on that to see if there's anything that they can do to expedite it. But really what we're seeing is that it's unforeseen. It's things that we don't have control of. And I think we're seeing that a lot in various areas of our culture right now. So what we're looking at right now is substantial completion is estimated to be by the end of October. So, and that's pending any unknown supply issues. So if we have some additional supply issues, we likely won't have substantial completion. I think we're pretty set on the concrete and that work being done by the end of September. That takes about 2 weeks to cure before you can actually drive on it. So The earliest best case scenario is mid-October that you could actually open the street up for traffic. Now, there'll have to be a conversation about if we want to do that or not, before everything is done, because we would be closing down the street pretty regularly to finish it up. So, but I know the businesses are itching to have that open. Some of the new businesses on Main Street that have invested quite a bit into their new spaces want people to be able to use their new entrances and things like that. So we'll work with all of the groups involved to try to make sure that we try to keep everybody as happy as possible. But I wanted to provide a little update on the project itself, and just let everybody know that it is delayed mostly because of supply chain issues that we're having with some items. So, but we are working very closely with Pember about trying to get this done as soon as we can. I think the next slide I have is just kind of what it looks like. So you can kind of envision all that gravel and concrete wall forms. This is what it's going to eventually look like here, as a reminder. So are there any questions? I know that I've fielded quite a few questions from City Council about this. Is there anything that has come up recently that you'd like to talk about, just as far as what's going on there? Now would be the time to do it. Otherwise, we'd look to get a motion to approve that pay application. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Yes, but I have a quick question. What's the status of the lot next to the bank and the bar? And do we have any indication of what the bank might be doing for a drive-through? Maybe that's beyond tonight, but people wonder about that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I have been working very closely with the bank on what they're going to do. I haven't received any formal plans. They've been brainstorming ideas. I think that, I'd be maybe speculating a little bit, but they might be waiting for the project to kind of get completed before they make a decision on what they're going to do. So, but we have been in communication. That lot is vacant. There's an opportunity there. There's also a lot that the city owns to the north side that's vacant as well. That's parking. That we'll have a conversation about in the near future as far as what we want to do with that, as far as redevelopment goes. So, but yeah, nothing to report of substance on the FFM lot there.
Refresh our memory, or my memory anyway. The parking lot, which is part of the Ferry Street redevelopment, what's the timing on that again?
The one to
major
the
parking lot, the big one.
on the west side of the,
Yes.
yep, that we're looking at doing that in conjunction with the CASA 36 project next year. So that'll get rehabilitated at that time.
So for a considerable amount of time to open, you work there. So access to the bank would still be going in Ferry Street through the large parking lot and over, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of moving parts. We're trying to work with all the property owners the best we can to ensure access and things like that. It's been a struggle. We've had a lot of detours and a lot of construction in town this year, but for the most part, we've gotten through it unscathed, and everybody's been willing to work with us on it.
Thank you. Anybody else? I know it's been kind of exciting to watch this all happen this summer, and it'll be real exciting once it opens. So I'm looking forward to it. Anybody else have any comments before we move on to a motion? This time I'll accept any a motion for the approval of pay application number 3 to Pember Companies Incorporated for $231,617.36.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Mahoney.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schluter. Any other comments, discussions, concerns? Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Very good. Moving on to comments, reports, commissions, anything anybody wants to share at this time, any community events, your commissions, your committees you're part of, this is your chance, this is your platform. This time we'll start with Council Member Krogman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think
Yes, sir.
the others may want to chime in on the first one right away. Certainly, we owe a debt of gratitude and thanks, same thing, to those who organized and put on the Giant Day celebration this weekend. It was exceptionally well done. Often one person mentioned it and the others don't know if they should, but I would, if I may, with your permission, you would allow others to comment also. I was very impressed with the work they put in, considering they had to wait an extra year to do it. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I would
you wanna
agree.
do?
It was a fun event to attend.
Very good.
Anybody else?
Yeah, also, I mean, not just the giant committee itself, but all the service organizations, the volunteers, the city of Sueur. It's fun to see a lot of people come together for a common cause, and I would agree. It was a great weekend, and hopefully everything went well.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No, I would just hope that we have the fair thing actually come back again next time, because that was a great change.
Good, good. Thank you, Mr. Lozey.
If I then, Mr. Mayor, I'll continue my
Thank you.
report.
Yep.
Councilmember Sleater and I attended the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, commonly called CGMC, summer meeting a week ago, roughly a week ago, a little over a week. I'm going to make a quick report on that. That organization is our advocate and they give us information. And they form outcomes that they hope to have each year. And among them were these, I'm not going to mention all, but protecting local government aid, LGA, which was well protected. In fact, our city administrator later will mention to you, perhaps we're actually going to get more money this year, in 2022. It was voted on this year, but next year we'll get a little more. But CGMC was a big factor in helping us keep that funding. Secondly, they work very hard on childcare issues. It's not a particular issue in our community, as we've heard from the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation. We don't seem to have an issue with childcare deficits or not having it here, but it could be, and it could happen very quickly. So it's good to know that that organization is working on our behalf. And finally, the other was that they advocated for small city streets and having funding for that. And in the end, there was success in obtaining funding for that. We'll have to see if we can take advantage of that. But all this, my bottom line is, and Councilmember Sleater would certainly have other comments about the conference, but we're well represented in the sense of being informed and also having an advocate, an effective advocate with our legislators. So it was good to be there. It was good to connect with other communities. One final thing is that every year we pay dues to the CGMC, and the dues will remain the same next year, which is also good news. And we also have been a participant in what's called the voluntary contribution for the Environmental Action Fund, which helps us, for example, with issues involving our water treatment, wastewater treatment. And that fund will remain at the same voluntary contribution, and that will come back to the council in terms of a budget item later on. So it was well worth attending. You know, when you go to these conferences, you don't every minute get something exciting, but you meet other people with similar issues, and I found it very helpful. So if I may, I'll let you call on whomever next, but you might want to have Councilmember Sleater tag on to that in some ways.
Very good. We will bypass to Mr. Schleter next. Thank you.
It was a great event. I really can't add much more to what Councilmember Krogman said, but we'll be briefing the city administrator tomorrow in more details. One other thing I had, HRA, we're still searching for a new director. Mark Huntington is acting as the temporary director with assistance from Monica Muckall, the previous director, since we did have a prior agreement with her for the transition. So we're utilizing her in the meantime. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Schleter. Appreciate your report also. Moving on to Councilmember Lozey. Nothing tonight? Very good. Councilmember Mahoney.
Yeah, I'll just say that our pack at our last meeting, we started to review a tree planting list for approval. And so we'll be reviewing that again and probably bringing it to board for official approval.
Thank
And
you.
that's just to make sure that we're keeping a diversified tree forest.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to Councilmember Sullivan, not here tonight. Councilmember Swanberg. Thank you. And I'll kind of end with a little bit of giant celebration myself. I had a wonderful time. It's great to renew old relationships, see a lot of people in the community haven't seen in a while. It's good to solidify current relationships. So big success 2021 and looking forward to 2022. And we'll end with you, Mr. Krugel.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kirby. So I'll talk first a little bit about LGA and Councilmember Krogman's statement. So we will be receiving about $9,000 more compared to 2021 and 2022. So we will see a little increase there. The small cities grant that Councilmember Krogman brought up is actually a pretty substantial amount. It's $67,000 that we got, and we get this almost, it seems like on average probably every 3 to 4 years. So, and that helps. That's something that's unbudgeted. We don't know if we're going to get it. So, but it goes right into our street repairs, which we've been really obviously tackling pretty hard here in the last few years. So that's very helpful, but it is one-time money. It's not something that we see every year, but it is helpful. But that is a substantial amount. I think the last time we received that small cities money was in 2018, and it was for, I think, 35,000, 33,000, something like that. So couple other updates. We will be starting the community development director interviews next week. So we have some, I guess we'll call them semi-finalists or something like that. So we'll be moving that process along. We're still on track to do an early September, possibly the first meeting in September hire evaluation by city council. So we're on track with that. We do have a personnel and budget committee meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And then we have a couple of meetings next week. We have the planning commission meeting that actually got rescheduled. It's normally on this Thursday, but it got pushed to the 19th. And then we have the second Sueur Community Center Task Force meeting on the 19th as well, and that's from 4 to 6. And that'll actually be held in the council chambers this time, just to accommodate a few of the members, and then also to have a little bit better audio video system to record the meeting so others can view it. So, you know, we talked quite a bit about the community center in the audit report today. And what we're ultimately going to try to get is a recommendation from the group as far as some budgetary considerations. Ultimately, that lies on city council to make those decisions as far as the community center and how those dollars are expended and funded. But the group is looking into those. You know, we have Mayor Kirby and Councilmember Sullivan on that task force, so they're getting kind of the real nuts and bolts of it. But ultimately, what we'll see is something that's incorporated into the budget document that the Personnel and Budget Committee is gonna start working on pretty heavily in the next 5 to 6 weeks. So that's all I have for my update. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And just a last note regarding the financial audit we just went through tonight. I want to thank Mr. Mayor and his company for what they do. They're kind of like the referees. We're kind of like the coaches on the sidelines, but you guys actually execute. So thank you for staying within the boundaries we set for you. And you guys do a wonderful job, you and your administration. So thank you, Jasper. With that said, I would like to entertain any motion for an adjournment tonight.
So moved.
It's been moved. All those in
Second.
favor? And seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Make sure we have a second this time.
The adjournment. Thank you, everybody. Bonnie, we'll see you around.